This is Fan Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Haji Outlaw for the first time. Welcome to the Fan Electric Ghost podcast.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
So, how you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Pretty lazy
Well, it's
Saturday
always
here.
great.
Just relaxing, talking to you. Say again?
Yeah, we're in New England, so we're
Oh,
having a kind of a muggy day today, but it's all
ah,
good. So we're going to talk today. We'll let people know this is episode 931 of the Family Electric Ghost podcast. We've been on air since 2016. That's tracking on Apple Podcast. And this episode, we're going to talk about television, race, politics, and music. And we also want to let people know, you see up above, there's a icon that says listen on Newsly. We are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. You can use coupon code GHOST and get 1 month free premium subscription. This podcast will be on Newsly later today. So I want to let people know that. And then we'll put your actual website back up. So for those
okay.
of the audience that's actually listening rather than watching, we want to let people know that we have the website, https:// HajiOutlawHD.biz. And if people
Thank you.
go there, what would they find?
Basically, it's a feeder site for my book series, the first book in the series about my life as a doorman in LA. So you can get a free chapter of the book there, join a subscriber mailing list, and I can get you a free chapter. You can check out excerpts from the book.
Well, that's cool. So like we always encourage people to click on that when we're fully published. That will be clickable, so you'll be able to actually do a click through. Right now, you can't click on it, but that's what we like to have people who watch the podcast or listen to it when they look at it on all the platforms that we're on. We encourage people to click those URLs of the guests that we talk to. So again, thank you again for being on the show. I don't know where you want to start with your background. But I want to let people know, like you've written for television, the Eric Andre Show, CBS, Comedy Central, NBC, film, commercials, the numerous books, including like Hey Doorman, These Movies Suck, and I guess Mangelscarre. I don't know
Mangelscarre,
how
yeah.
to pronounce
Yeah, the
the
way I
last
wrote it on
one.
that for that book version, it's like a French
But
sounding version of it.
you produce music, cool.
Yeah,
You produce music for Kool Keith, Chris Crack, and yourself. So
correct.
you've been a
Yeah.
comedian for over 15 years, and maybe where do you want to start with your career? Because you had like a varied career.
Oh, if I'll start at the beginning of stuff. Uh, I guess around high school or going to college, I was always played. I'd never done any comedy or like acting or anything like that. Basically, just I played baseball, and going to college, my major was going to be electrical engineering. Uh, but once I got out of college, well, actually in college, I started making music. I got a MPC beat machine, was making music there, but I never thought about doing comedy. It's once I got out of college and I got a regular job, and I was like, oh, this isn't fun at all. And I saw some open mic stuff in Chicago, which is where I'm from. And I was like, let me go check out this open mic one night. And the girl I was seeing, she had tickets to go see the Roots, and I was like, I want to skip it and go do this comedy. She's like, you're gonna skip seeing the Roots? And I was like, yeah, I think I am. I think I've seen them before, so I was like, okay, I'll do that. And then everything kind of snowballed from there. That's where I met a lot of guys who are very comedians now. I met Hannibal Buress there in Chicago, T.J. Miller, Dion
Mm-hmm.
Cole, a lot of different people. And I ended up moving to L.A. For writing. I think Hannibal moved like a year before to New York. So it was in LA where I started kind of getting in the system, getting into television writing, which is it's a weird dynamic as a big black dude trying to get into writing TV, especially if you don't write anything that's black. Uh, it was like, I think I moved out there in '09, so it was right after
Yeah.
the last writer strike. So my writing got attention. I got signed
Oh
both with,
wow.
with Three Arts, and CAA was my agency. But like I never got any real work through them.
Wow.
That was always through connections I had through Hannibal, through Eric Andre, through other people I knew in the business. So that's kind of where I started getting into comedy. I guess that's the beginning of it, from engineering, baseball to stand up.
That's interesting because you were in those pro organizations, or you're like a BMI. I'm a musician. You were probably familiar with that, and you
Yeah.
weren't getting work except for your connections. That you had these like personal connections, and you were getting better results from that. Is that kind of a
Oh,
commentary on like the race situation in the industry?
I believe so. Because I was noticing, well, the first thing that happened was like I signed with 3 Arts, and then they sent my writing out to agencies, and they started with CAA, and CAA wanted to meet, and so all of a sudden, within 1 month, I went from having nothing to having 2 managers and 4 agents, and everyone was just sending everything out and going everywhere. And I was going to all these general meetings at all the major networks multiple times. And the first thing I noticed was there was never a black dude in any of the meetings ever. Like the closest was there was a diversity person at NBC. It was a black woman, and I guess her assistant was brown, but he had straight hair. So I don't know if he was like Indian or something or what it was,
Yeah,
but that was
yeah.
the closest I saw to any black people anywhere. And then when I wasn't getting any work, I was looking around at other people I knew were working, and all the other black dudes. I'm like, they worked on black shows, or B, they were usually overqualified for anywhere. Like when Dion
Mhm.
Cole, I know he got Conan O'Brien. He had already been in multiple movies. He was touring, so he didn't need that. When Hannibal got 30 Rock, he was already been on TV. I don't know, two, three, 4 times for stand up. He had been in some small movies, so and he was touring, so he didn't really need that. And I was like, oh, I started seeing that pattern of being like, oh, I kind of get it now. All right, yeah,
So it's kind of like the black writers and actors and production people have to kind of network themselves without, the general industry is ignoring the talent, and you have to kind of have this kind of connection thing, which, I found, like, I'm in software engineering, and the same
okay,
thing happened. I've been in it 25 years. Every time I
hmm,
walk in the room, I'm the only guy who looks like me, unless there's guys
yeah,
from India. And they're not
yeah,
they're
yeah,
not African Americans.
exactly,
So it's
yeah,
like 25 years, and I never see anybody that looks like me. I go to schools trying to get kids to get into it, and more kids are getting into it now. But
hmm,
it's like, come on, you know. It's like it seems
yeah.
like they just don't want to, they want to stay like a Bill Gates, Steve Jobs kind of world. And I guess it's the same thing in entertainment. They like those, they want to, in that kind of zone. It's like, okay, you guys just want to be these guys. They went to the same schools and on the golf course together.
Exactly. I remember I had a meeting for it was a Tim Allen had a new show, not the old Home Improvement, but the new one he had that I think was on
Mhm.
ABC.
Oh, that other one.
And my
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and I remember it was a showrunner meeting for that one, and it was on the CBS lot, and I knew that lot a little bit. But I don't know if you know those lots, like they don't mark the streets, they don't mark the doors. So they gave me a room,
Oh,
but there's
wow.
no room number. So I walked by
Oh,
the office
geez.
once. I see a guy in there walking into the hall, like no one else is there. I walk back, and he sees me again. And he's like, "Are you Haji?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm here for. Are you so and so?" "Yeah, I'm here for the meeting." He's like, "Oh, great." And I saw a big exhale, like, "Oh." Like he didn't expect me to look like me. It was that like
Yeah,
deflated, like you know how you go on a date with someone and like they don't look like their profile picture. It felt like one of
yeah,
those, and I was like, oh, there we
yeah.
go.
I
And
mean,
my
that happened
manager
to me
told
a bunch of.
really,
Yeah, I mean, that's a common thing. I think it happens to us. But go on.
and so my manager told me exactly what they wanted me to write for. It was like one character. He's like, they're gonna ask you this, this, and this. Like he knew all these details. They did none of that. They just showed me a clip from the show and was like, "What you think?" I thought it was pretty good. Blah blah blah. They asked me nothing my manager thought they would. It was like as soon as they saw me, they were almost like, "Oh, no, we don't think you're right." Like I
Yeah,
think in general they just have a look of someone who looks like a writer, and a big black dude is
yeah.
just like, "Oh, I don't think he's a
M-
writer."
Maybe you should look like Woody Allen.
Exactly. A squirrely looking white dude is probably the perfect way
Yeah,
to get in.
it's funny what you
Yeah.
wait. You got to look like Woody Allen, or you look like Seinfeld, but
Yeah.
something like that.
Yep.
But the thing I remember, I went to a meeting. I have my 3-piece suit back in the '80s when I had to do it like that, back late '80s. Um, and I walked in the room, and I had the interview on the phone, and they were all really excited. I show up in in the lobby, and some lady comes down, looks like a secretary. She's looking all over the room, and she doesn't think that Keith's there. My name's Keith, but like she can't find me, right? Because she doesn't expect me to be a black dude. And then when she sees me, and then the whole thing kind of went south. It's like, okay, the phone interview was great, but then when I got there and they saw I was me, then they didn't like it. So that's the thing we had to deal with, and we still deal with. But Supreme Court doesn't think that's a problem. But okay,
yeah, good old Clarence Thomas, yeah.
Yeah, he was embarrassed. He said he was embarrassed by his time, that he felt like well, so you're going to shut the door on everybody else because you were embarrassed. You got through.
Exactly. Like
you were so embarrassed that people act like.
Yeah, the whole argument makes no sense. It's like, oh, someone created this gap for me to go through, and then as soon as he gets through, he's like, oh, forget the rest of y'all, close that gap up. Like, okay, man.
Yeah. He's even talking about maybe interracial marriage isn't valid, and he's married to a white woman. So I guess it's only for him.
Like
that
he's
things
a special
are good.
one.
He's the special guy.
Yeah, exactly. It's like kind of like the OJ Simpson mentality. Like, oh, I'm not black, I'm OJ. Like, okay, all right, okay, whatever, man.
Yeah. You're OJ until you get people think you killed somebody, then you're not. Then you're like, you get to the same category as anybody else.
Exactly. Yeah, also you show up to the black churches on the weekend and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta start getting some support. But so it's interesting that you were able to get into the industry because of your other connections, but that seems to be like frustrating for a lot of people. It's like, well, how do you get those connections? You happen to find a way by starting with your music, right? That's how you started, right? You started doing music, and then you put yourself out there, and then that caused attention. And I've kind of always told people, like, you kind of got to put yourself out there, because if you don't put yourself out there, nobody's going to find you, right? Is that kind of like your advice to people?
It's the same thing. Like, especially if you're someone black, they're not looking for anyone who looks like you. So you really have to be out there. And like, if I was giving advice to people who wanted to get into television or entertainment industry, I would say do as many jobs you can. Be a cinematographer, director, writer, actor, do everything. That way they'll know that even if you're so-and-so at one thing, you can do 2 or 3 or 4 other things. And they're always looking for ways to cut corners. So the more you can do, the better chance you got.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like when I got into music, I got into production. I've gotten like an Akai Force, but like I'm a synthesis. So I use like Moogs. I play keyboards, and so I do sound design, and so I do sound design, I do production, I do stuff like that. But then they got into podcasting, because there's like some guy in New York, a guy like did a podcast back in 2016. He found my SoundCloud, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to interview you because you have all these underground songs." And he was interested. So we did the first podcast back in 2016 on an app called Spearman, and we liked each other so much we did a combined podcast about music for like 6 months. And I had never even known about podcasts. And I said, "Oh, I should actually do this." And people were saying, "Well, why you spend so much time podcasting?" Well, it draws people to my brand, and so it, like, people find out about Phantom, and it's a podcast, and it's my band, and I'm a producer. So then I end up getting like work, because I just, like, people find out about me, and then it draws me into this whole thing where I try to weave music into my podcast, even when I'm talking to a CEO or I'm talking to a life coach. I try to weave the concept of creativity and how it can be used for everything. And so I found a way to thread the needle. But that's kind of like, my story. But I think it's like, you got to figure out how you can engage in this kind of internet world, of all this social media and all these other things. And I love the podcast because it's more than 30 seconds, right? Yeah. You got Reels and Instagram, TikTok, they're all like very short form. But this form is kind of different. It's a long form in a world where there's very short form stuff. And I'm like, well, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is cool. And also, at worst case scenario, you just shorten down a little bit and you send out little clips from the podcast that gets people into the full podcast. Yeah. So that's smart. That's a good move. Yeah.
You run a TikTok, you run a reel, you run a short, and you throw in like a landing page, and it draws people in. So yeah, I
Hmm.
mean, so you can still use those methods, but it's really interesting, how you have to look at things. But you talked us how you got into TV comedy writing, and how did you find that you had the knack for comedy? Because not everybody, like a lot of people, feel comedians actually tend to be really good actors, because they
Yeah.
seem to have a lot of depth. So do you feel that comedy has like an edge in writing, for at least for you, or maybe you can talk about comedy as a writer?
Yeah, sure. As far as writing, well, first of all, as far as acting, I don't think I'm good at acting at all. I'm just, I have like I'm more like a Steven Seagal when
Mhm.
it comes to act. Like I got one note, one tone. That's all I got. But for as far as writing, I'd say the first time I kind of realized that I was kind of getting somewhere. I think I was still in college, and I'd always watched comedians my whole life. Like I remember, I go way back. I was in the '80s. Eddie Murphy was always huge to me as a kid. I still
Mhm.
remember sitting on my aunt's floor, and I'd hear the Tonight Show Johnny Carson music. And I remember the first time I saw Eddie Murphy, I was like, "Who is this black dude with the skinny tie? 'Cause he's really funny." And then after that, that was when he was like early on Saturday Night Live, and he was blowing up, getting bigger. And my
Mhm.
parents weren't together, so I was staying with my dad one weekend, and I went to go see Eddie Murphy Raw, and I'm like 9 years old maybe,
Oh
and my mom was
wow.
like, "There's no way you're gonna go see Eddie Murphy Raw like that." She said, "That's just not happening," because she's a Richard Pryor fan, so she knew exactly what it was. My dad, I don't know if he
Yeah,
didn't know
she
or
knows what
didn't.
it's about.
Exactly. And my dad, I don't know if he didn't know or just didn't care, but he's like, "Sure, we can go see this Eddie Murphy thing." So I just remember going in there, watching it, and like 10 minutes in, I looked at my dad, I was like, "I don't think I should be watching this." But it was like, I think that was kind of like a sparking moment for me to like want to get into comedy. So every time I'd watch comedians like Def Jam or whatever, I always thought to myself, when I'd see like Bernie Mac or someone, I'd be like, I know I'm not that funny, but I can write something that good. And so that's
Mhm.
the idea always sparked me, because there was no one I ever saw was like, this guy's a better writer than me. So that was kind of my
Mhm.
kind of kicking off point for getting into stand up comedy. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I was a kid. I'm a child of the '70s, and so my
Mhm.
father had all these vinyl Bill Cosby records,
Uh,
and we grew up listening to those. And then
uh,
then we ended up hearing Richard Pryor, and then we were probably too young. But I had a brother who was 7 years older than me, and he used to let me listen to it. Even though my
okay.
parents would say you're not supposed to listen to that, and my brother would say, "Okay, yeah, I'm gonna let you listen to it." But it was like, yeah, there was a revelation when I'm hearing like Richard Pryor, and even when he was on TV for that short time with
Yeah.
his show,
Yeah.
I remember being able to see that, and I was like, wow, that was so cool. I mean, it's kind of like that was really groundbreaking to me.
Yeah. It was basically the precursor to
Mm.
Chappelle Show.
Yeah, yeah, it really was.
Yeah. Yeah, that was. I remember I watched those Richard Pryor. I think I got them on DVD somewhere. But it was after Chappelle Show. I heard about that Richard Pryor show. I was like, oh, let me get those episodes. And I was like, it
You
was.
went
You could
back in.
tell. Yeah, you could tell it was his usual brilliance, but you could also see where he was kind of just
Hmm.
handcuffed by being on. I think it was on NBC or on
Yeah,
regular TV. You're like, he can't. Like he couldn't get in the stuff he really
can't do
wanted to do. You
everything.
could tell. Yeah.
Yeah, he was sneaking as much as he could in. He could sneak
Hmm.
things in because he's really brilliant that way. So he tried to
Yeah.
push as much as he could. It's kind
Hmm.
of, but it's like it was just interesting because I grew up watching like Sanford and Son, Red Fox,
Yeah.
and it, no realizing that Red Fox live is nothing like Sanford and Son.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. It's really
I
it's
mean,
not cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 But but when you got maybe you want to talk about television and what you think is good on television and why, because I think that's an interesting thing, because like today there's so many channels, but is there really anything on? And maybe you can talk about what your opinions are.
Oh yeah, sure. I'm really picky about what I like on TV. I don't really watch anything on network for years. I think the last thing I watched on network TV or comedy wise was probably Parks and Rec. Uh, But the stuff I think is probably
Hmm.
been really brilliant nowadays. Succession was probably the best show I saw on TV in the last few years. Let me see what else. What I always thought was overrated was Game of Thrones. That was the first 2, 3 seasons of that. It was well written, and then I could see after that season with the Red Wedding, you just saw the writing go straight down. It went downhill, and once they were past the books, all they did was just regular TV tricks, and it was annoying because I had a bunch of friends who weren't in the industry who just like love Game of Thrones, and I kept telling them, "You're not gonna like the ending of this thing before it was over," because I'm like, the writing's it's out the window, it's gone, and then everyone's mad. Oh, the finale sucked. I'm like, were you paying attention the last 3 seasons? They didn't really care, and I knew stuff
Yeah.
from the from inside perspective. We're like, once you get to on network TV at least 5 seasons, all the lead writers, they're going into syndication, which means they've now got money to buy a house in Malibu, so they don't care. So that's why
And
HBO
they've
always
got the
had that.
fire in
Exactly. That's why
the film got
HBO
the
used to
fire
always
in the
have the
belly
thing.
thing.
Precisely. Yeah. Because like that's why I think HBO they used to have it. I don't know if they still do, but they had a thing where like they only wanted a show to go for 5 seasons because they knew at that
Wow.
point the creators
It
they're
drops off.
mentally checked out, so they're not trying that hard anymore. Uh, so that's kind of where I'm thinking. And, Rick and Morty is another on the animated side I love.
Hmm.
What's on TV now? That's probably the biggest ones. Breaking Bad was my favorite TV show of probably the best TV show I've seen. Number two I got is The Wire,
Hmm.
and after that, The
The Wire.
Sopranos or anyone else can try and duke it out. Uh, but those are probably my two favorite. And Chappelle Show is the funniest show I've
Yeah,
ever
I don't
seen
know.
on
I
TV.
lived. I had some time where I actually lived in Japan, and I got really into anime, and then I got
Okay.
into like K drama and Japanese dramas because I was living there, and then
Yeah.
I've been addicted to that ever since. Like I watch a lot of Asian cinema, a lot of K drama, because what I liked about it is they kind of go maybe 1 or 2 seasons, and then they go and the writers go create another series, and so it
Yeah.
never really goes like very long, and so you get like very different ideas. 'Cause I'm watching one now with some ladies like reincarnated, and she keeps on coming back and living her life, and they have these really interesting concepts that I don't see in Western TV. They do
Uh,
things that Westerners don't do from an Eastern perspective, which is kind of cool for me. But
uh, yeah. That's interesting. I'd like to check some of that out because I remember I watched one that was really good. There's only 2 seasons. Attack on Titan. I don't
hmm,
think it was a
yeah,
Japanese
yeah,
or I don't know if it's
animes are really
anime.
good.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
there's
that's
only
an
two
anime.
seasons, and I was like, anime. Yeah, and that was really good. And the same thing that I guess the Asian market does, the UK, England, they only try and go a couple seasons, and they go on to something
Hmm.
else, which is 'cause that way nothing ever gets stale,
Yeah,
which I think is it's good. But like
yeah,
I know in America, the it's just money driven. So they're as soon as they get anything they like and it's doing well, they just keep chucking money at it to make more, 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 more.
yeah, yeah. You got like
So,
you got 20 seasons of like CSI, whatever city they say it is.
yeah,
You
exactly.
know, you just keep
Yeah.
on doing it again. But it's like, okay, but so what are your favorite film directors?
Oh, Tarantino's probably my favorite ever. Second would be Scorsese. And
Mm,
that race is pretty darn close. Christopher
hmm.
Nolan, Dennis Villeneuve, the guy who did Sicario and Dune.
Mm.
Spike Lee.
Which
Those
Spike
are like the
Lee
top.
film is your favorite? Which Spike Lee film is your favorite film?
Ooh, that's gonna sound corny, but it's probably Do the Right Thing. That or the 25th Hour. That's the one that
Yeah,
like some
yeah,
people missed. That was
yeah. I like that.
25th Hour was
That's
one.
very
Yeah,
good.
yeah. It just
Yeah, that's
I
an
love
awesome
the
film because he showed. Yeah, he showed how he could stretch. You know, because everybody said, "Oh, he's the kind of niche guy," and then he went and did
yeah.
that, and it's like, well, hey, he's not as niche as you think because she's got to have it and then do the right thing.
Hmm.
Like they're not in the same place. They're,
No,
he shows a diversity of what what he can do. But yeah, I was a kid in college when I saw Do the Right Thing,
Okay.
and I'm like, and I was listening to the Public Enemy on it,
Hmm.
and I was like really into Public Enemy at that time because they had just came out with like Nations a Million, and
Hmm.
then they did that song Fight the Power, and I was like, yeah. I was wearing the Flavor Flav medallion, the Africa medallion, you know, and the clock about camp business. Hey, what time is it? But
Yeah, it reminded me of my cousin's. That was also Public Enemy, his favorite group. I think he was the one who kind of told me about the movie Fight the Power, 'cause he's like, I don't know, maybe 6 years older than me, but he's the one that kind of put me on. I was like, oh, okay, that movie was dope. Yeah, yeah. And
well,
then
I love the
25th
Bomb
Hour.
Squad, like
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. The Bomb Squad
his
is it.
production, the production team.
Yeah, those guys were beasts. Before they put those sampling they changed the legals. They were probably the best and most diverse production team in hip hop. The fact that they could do all the Public Enemy, and then they did Ice Cube's
Yeah,
first album. They're
yeah.
like in my kind of grandfathered in greatest production teams ever.
Well, I like De La Soul. I like what they did with like De La Soul was dead. I think De La Soul had another kind of vibe doing that heavy
Hmm.
layered
Yeah.
sampling. And to me, it's like there's a real artistry when you look at like bands like De La Soul and Public Enemy to the level of the just like the field recordings they would throw in, the backward tape
Hmm.
loop, and it's like George Martin level, Sergeant Pepper level stuff that they're doing. It
Hmm.
was like fantastic. There's an art. There's really art, and
Yeah.
it's sad when the licensing came in and kind of shut it down. But no, I think there's a lot of art that you can get into that as a producer when you look at the kind of sound painting. I'm a very much a person that looks at sound paintings and layering and the colors of what you
Okay.
can do, and I'm
Hmm.
very much inspired by Parliament Funkadelic and the Hendrix and other people, Pink Floyds of the world that use the studio as a canvas. And I thought that the Bomb Squad and those guys were doing like the same thing in hip hop.
They were. Period. I mean, the layers of. I think they were the only. I think they were one of the only groups that Prince allowed anyone to sample him because he respected Chuck D and what Public Enemy was doing, not just their content, but also their sound and how layered and diverse their sound was. He's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you guys can sample me. And he didn't let anyone else sample. Yeah.
Yeah, Prince was very much into like musicians have to be musicians, but when he listened to them, he respected what they did. And so he actually saw the artistry where he was kind of like not into the Ice Ice Baby, just take that Queen Bowie
Mhm.
song and just rap over it.
Yeah.
That's like that's not art. I'm a big
Yeah.
Prince
He
fan, and then
just.
he used to go off on anybody that wasn't at the level that he thought they could be at, and I think that he respected what they were doing.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah.
So when you here's a cool question, like why have you never watched Friends? I can guess why, but maybe you tell us.
I just remember it being on, and all my white friends were watching it. And that at the time, I didn't watch Seinfeld either at the time because I remember, first of all, Friends, it was just nothing was appealing to me. Literally, people described it. I was just like, no, I don't get it all. But at the same time, I was watching Living Single, which those two shows were competing at the same
Mhm.
time to come out, and they're basically the same show. But it was just all white people
Mhm.
living in a spot in New York. I was like, I just don't care. I don't care at all. And I've never thought anything was that funny except for Lisa Kudrow. She's the only one where I'll see her something like she's good. Everyone else, I'm just like, I just don't get it. That was it.
Yeah, I remember not really getting it because I mean I was like into the Cosby Show, and we know what happened to Cosby today, but like
Yeah.
that to me was like I'm going to school, let's watching Different World and all that stuff and all the spin-offs because like I was very much a kid that had grown up watching like the Jeffersons and what's happening and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And I just like the fact that we were able to show a middle class black family in that kind of light, and then the positivity of it. And initially in the '70s, a lot of the stuff that Cosby did was this kind of positivity.
Oh yeah.
That now that's all been tainted. But I was that was more appealing as a middle class black kid to me. Wanting to see that because kind of growing up seeing other things is like, okay, can we see something a little more not stereotypical?
Yeah. Yeah, I was the same way. Like the corny, stereotypical stuff. It was like, even as a kid, I was inherently like, this feels inauthentic. It feels like you're trying to stick
Force.
a square peg into a round hole. Like it didn't fit to me. And I think it was sort of like, that's why I was like, I used to love the Jamie Foxx show and other shows that are like coming up, the Wayans Brothers show. But like, it was
Yeah.
interesting to me, and those people were funny. Where like Friends, I'm just like, who is funny on this thing? This guy Joey doesn't seem funny. I don't get any of the funny in this thing at all. But
It seemed like kind of like to me they're continuing kind of like you leave it to Beaver kind of my mentality, right? It's like a Brady Bunch mentality. It's like I'm a
yeah,
child of the '70s, like a Gilligan's Island mentality. It's
yeah,
like what is that? It's like okay, make it so much like that. They're like okay, that's antiseptic. That's okay. That'll pass by all the censors. No trouble. No issues
hmm
here. No controversy.
yeah. I actually read a book about when they were making the show Lost. Executives, they said for years, ever since Gilligan Island, they have been trying to make other editions or an updated edition of Gilligan's Island, and that's what Lost was. Like they just have,
Hmm.
like, I think executives, they
They
have
got
a
the
template of,
heavy.
yeah, yeah, yeah. They take one template that works at one time and they keep trying to do it over and over again. You see it with actors too. Ever since James Dean,
Yeah.
every big white actor looks like some version of James Dean. Brad Pitt looks like a blonde version. James Franco looks just like him. Josh Hartnett. They keep taking the same people, it's the same thing over and over and over again. Yeah,
Yeah, where they got to keep on remaking classic movies. It's like, okay, you're going to just keep on redoing the same thing. Like, where's all the
yeah,
new ideas? It's like it's very frustrating. Because even when you get into music, you get people just okay, I'll just remake this song. Like I think of the
yeah.
Tracy Chapman, Fast Car, that got remade, and I'm happy she's getting the royalties from the remake. But
Yeah.
it's like I rather listen to a new Tracy Chapman song than I listened to that when it came out. And I understand it.
Mhm.
That there's all this like energy into this remixing things that already exist. And I'm kind of like I was a big Prince head because I loved when Prince was willing to challenge the industry and actually do what he wanted, which was
Yeah.
not do Purple Rain over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, and the industry, his label would have been happy just do another Purple Rain for the next 2 decades. They would have been happy, but the next album was different. And then by the time he hit the '90s, he went off on tangents. He was just like, of just different
Yeah,
sound everywhere, like experimental stuff. He just did everything just musically he wanted to do. And at that point, the industry kind of was like, he was kind of pushed aside. They were promoting
yeah.
other people, and he got kind of, he was always a genius, but they
Yeah.
treated him like he was almost a second class citizen.
Well, the problem is like there's a whole story because I'm a total Prince head, but to deviate, like he actually was told like, oh, why don't you just do another Purple Rain, right? So he actually did, and in the vault is a Purple Rain 2. He actually
Oh,
presented it, and then he said, guess what? It's not coming out. I just wanted to show you I could do it, but I don't want it coming out because I don't. I can do that because I know
yeah,
how to play. I can do anything I want. I just I prove it to you. I can do it. They threw it in the can. Now one day
oh
Warner's going to
wow,
re-release that because they want to push it. But
yeah,
yeah, he could do anything on demand. He's like a Hendrixian level. The thing about Prince is like he's one of the most experimental musicians next to Hendrix that ever got into the top. And
yeah,
so that's what they didn't understand that he was in the same kind of zone as a Hendrix, as a Morrison, as all those kind of guys. Very experimental guy that happened to be able
mhm,
to make hits, but that wasn't
yeah,
his motivation. If he happened to write a song that was a hit, that's fine. But that wasn't, he just, well, that's where his head was. And if people matched where his head was, then he'd get a hit. But when he, suddenly he doesn't want to do that anymore, then, he'd drop off. But he'd be able to come back sometimes and people would say, "Oh, he came back." Like he was never gone. You just weren't
yeah,
buying it. I was buying every album they ever did until he died, and he never
yeah,
stopped. is just people like would drop off because they didn't hear what they wanted.
Yeah, and he already did that at concerts too, where everyone always say, "I want to hear Purple Rain." He did like, I think it was him just in a piano for a whole tour. And I don't think he did Purple Rain songs after Purple Rain for like 20, 30 years. And I think he just dropped like one or two songs. Like he just like, I've done that. I don't want to do it anymore, which is why he's such a great artist. But the industry doesn't care about that. It's want their money.
You know, you think about like a Miles Davis, you know, he was the king of bebop, and then he created fusion, right? And then he, you know, in the later years, he did this kind of funk fusion, new wave thing. And, you know, people liked it or not, but he actually did pretty well with it. So he was like in all the major ages. And, you know, the industry initially, you know, when he went into fusion, they were saying, "Oh, that you're like a Judas or something." Like you can't, because they acted like fusion, like bebop is supposed to be like the real jazz. And then when he moved to fusion, they were like, "Oh, you can't do that." And he said, "Why not? I do whatever I want." You know, it's like, why can't I go into something different? It's like, and they all these purists, and now after the fact, they say, "Oh, that's a great genre." But at the time he created that genre, or was one of the people in the genre, they were slamming him. And it was like, you know, and Prince had an affinity for Miles. I got like tapes of him playing with Miles. The Miles and him got together in the late 90s, you know, before he died. And they actually have their songs that they did together. And it really shows the synergy. I mean, he actually did stuff with George Clinton too, because I was a hero of his. And, you know, he just loved, you know, anybody that was in the, you know, in that kind of zone.
Oh, I didn't know all that. All right. Interesting.
Yeah. If you dive into the Prince's catalog, you'd be surprised at the people the stuff that's in the vault. I mean, he has a full album with Stevie Nicks, not just the song he did the full album. Never got put out. He did stuff with punk rockers like Hoops to Do out of Seattle. Never came out. He has like tons of stuff from multiple people, multiple genres that's eventually going to come. He has so many songs that are in the vault that they're going to blow out most of the modern musicians, the level of stuff that he has in the vault.
Oh, yeah. Wow. All right. I gotta download some of that. So what do you think about
music? What do you think about music today with like AI? Like I'm, you know, being a kind of I'm a keyboard player. I'm a guy that plays original music, and you know, some people say, "Oh, it's kind of like what happened with hip hop." And I say, I don't know about that, because it's still a person making choices.
Yeah.
In hip hop, right? But AI, you're letting the computer make the choice.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of AI doing anything. To me, it's basically a copyright infringement anytime you do it, because you're essentially having a computer do what a person can do, but you don't want that person to do it. So to me, it's like you're bringing in kind of like a scab, or like crossing like a union or something. Like you're bringing in something it's to me, it's completely unethical. Exactly. Yeah, it's like you're crossing a picket line, but you got a robot that's just going to cross it and do what you want to do. I don't like it at all. I don't like it for writing. I don't like it for music. I've heard some of the AI where they can feed it like all this. I saw one clip, they had like Eminem doing some different genre, but they have his voice modulated based on past works to do it. And I'm like, yeah, it sounds like him until you really listen to it, and you're like, no. You're like, it doesn't. It's like a superficially, it's him, but it's not really him. If you listen to it, you're like, no, it's not. I feel like if you played if Eminem's kid was like 7 years old and heard an AI of him, this kid would be like, oh, that's not my dad at all.
Yeah.
There's no way.
It's unethical in that. Yeah, I mean, it's unethical if you think about like if Eminem, he might have never chosen to do that, and then you make him sound like he did, and then kids might think he actually did it, right? And so to me, as an artist, like I don't want somebody taking my voice and doing something unauthorized. I got to clear it. I think you need to clear it like a sample. I think you should, the right artist, if you're going to use my voice, that's me. So you shouldn't use my voice unless I clear it. And you can't just randomly grab it and say it's yours.
Exactly. I agree. And I think the percentage for what you should get if you're using AI for the artists they're using should be way higher than what it normally is when you sample somebody. Like, because you're not just doing something they've already done and already recorded. You're taking something and creating it in their voice. So I feel like if you're getting, like, you should be getting 90% of that check should be coming to the actual artist. Yeah.
Yeah. I really think it should be like a really high percentage. And the other thing is my daughter's a graphic artist. And there's a lot of people that do art with AI and don't understand that it's grabbing published artists off the web and grabbing their work and acting like it made it. It created it. It's not. It's just grabbing what's out there in the universe of the web and pulling it based on your suggestion. And if they can grab it, because a lot of graphic artists don't have digital rights management. So they got their work out there and these programs can grab it. And so like a lot of graphic artists are going to have to go out and actually get into digital rights management like the way musicians have and actually put copyright strikes on people. And, you know, those type of artists had never thought of having to do that. But now because of AI, you know, you got to start doing that for like all your art.
Yeah. You have to, because with AI, they're just going to keep stealing from you forever. Yeah.
Yeah. Until you register, you have to start registering. Like artists are going to have to get together, kind of unionize in a way, you know, get into pro organizations and say, these are the standards. These are the rules. And you know, and I think it happened with sampling, and it's going to force it with this. In my opinion, it's going to force the issue because, you know, it's just like, you know, when you get into streaming, you know, there's a lot of what's your opinion about streaming and royalties versus like syndication? Because I think that's been a big issue for writers, right, in your industry.
Yeah. Well, for writers, you're getting screwed heavily with streaming. So I had a buddy who was writing for Kevin Hart's show. And this was when they started. I think that show, The Husbands of Hollywood, that show. And I remember him saying, because after it sold, I think it was on BET, but after it was sold and it went to streaming, he was like, all of a sudden, those like a $5,000 check he would get every time they would play with his name written by, those would completely go away. So you have people who are, especially if you're living in LA, let's say if you're just a staff writer, you're making, let's say, $75,000 a year. And with bonuses, you're making about 100. Now you're dipping down below that 75. So you got people who are writing on successful shows they basically have to live with a roommate in LA. So you're like, financially, it makes no sense. You're getting screwed. And someone's getting all that money. And it's all the executives who are getting all this money, as usually for doing a lot of nothing, but making backroom deals that make them more money. Yeah.
You know, selling it to Spotify so they can pay people no money.
Exactly.
They were selling it to Netflix so they can pay people no money. It's the same thing in the music industry. It's like, what are you guys doing? Like Prince used to say, what are all those guys in the corporate, like they don't know the difference between a groove and you know, and asphalt. They don't know anything. Like what do they know about being a musician? I saw something like a talk where Prince was just slamming the people in the industry and saying, what did they don't know a groove if it hit them over the head. They don't know anything about music. Are they going to tell me about music? It's like he was going off. It's like
yeah. I totally get it, because I mean, especially from like Prince.
What do they know about writing?
They know nothing, and generally speaking, like I think the AI, because the industry, that's what a big part of the strike. Like they want to keep that AI as something they can use, and so I think for comedy, I don't think AI is good enough, because comedy is exceedingly human, and it's an innate reaction to laugh, and AI can't do that. They might get lucky and do like 1 out of 5 or something, but they can't consistently like give you laughs in a show. But if you have something like Law and Order or all those CSIs, that AI, because those things are they're just complete. They're creating drama, and it's really simple drama. AI could do that all day, which is part of the industry's fault, because those shows might have like 12 or 15 writers writing something that is. You need one person to write this thing, but you have a staff where you're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to, and you're pretty much putting out crap. That's where the AI is really going to bite him in the butt. But like, there's no AI that's going to do Chappelle's show or do Larry David. Yeah.
Yeah, I think again, if you want to do something like a classic type of writing, like a Rod Serling, science fiction level stuff, if you get into like really good science fiction stories, I just don't think it's going to have the creativity to have the imagination to do the Star Trek kind of Space 1999 Star Wars type of ideas there. Like there's no template because we're trying to do something unknown, or they're taking social commentary and throwing it into science fiction. That's always been the kind of thing that I liked about Star Trek, because Star Trek would kind of lose Leonard Nimoy as the subterfuge for race relations. It's like, so he's like, oh, you green-blooded alien, Bones is always doing racist things against him. He's always making these racist statements. And I think Spock was kind of like the honorary black guy.
Pretty much.
Getting slammed all day.
Yeah, and that's why he had to be so calm all the time. He basically had to be Jackie Robinson, just like, no, we want no aggression from you. Just play the game, be nice. Yeah, that's what he had to be.
Take everybody out. He could take everybody out. You'd have an episode where he kind of loses cool and then show the fact that he's stronger than everybody on the whole ship, and he could just wipe everybody out.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. I remember that episode, and I didn't think about that because he's really the number 2, and he should be number 1. Like he's looking at Kirk like, why are you the captain of the ship?
Why are you captain? He's like, I got a better brain. I'm stronger. I can think faster. I can do everything better than you.
Yeah.
And you make a lot of mistakes, Kirk. You're always putting mistakes to almost blow up the ship, like every episode.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a commentary. That's a commentary on America. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, but you're the guy, right? You're the guy because you're the familiar guy. You got the look. You got that all-American look, but you almost blew up the Enterprise like 99 times.
Every other week, he almost blowing it up. Yeah. Yeah.
But it just seems today we're kind of living in the negative zone, twilight zone world, where it seems like I heard somebody say this about the Supreme Court. They've created gerrymandered decisions that fit their opinion. That they've done, and actually they're not following stare decisis. They're not following like hundreds of years of the law the way it's supposed to be. They're creating these new precedents that make no sense. It's like a gerrymandered voting district. It doesn't make sense. It's like highly convoluted to get where they want to go.
Yeah, it's like that they have their own perspective. They have their conservative leaning, and they're trying to take the entire country in that direction. And they're not doing it in a way that's law abiding. Especially that thing I heard about the woman who didn't want to make, I thought it was graphic design or it was like cakes or something for people who weren't heterosexual, and like they had the case went all the way up to them, and they found out it's not even a real case. They just made up the case, and then the Supreme Court voted on it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a theoretical case. It was fake. It was created by a neoconservative group, made a fake theoretical case, actually used the guy's name, and then reporters went to the guy and said, "Did you actually bring that?" It's like, no. And so people are saying that there should be some kind of consequence. This is the problem with the founders. They assume they can build this branch of government that has no checks and balances on it.
Right? There's nothing you can do with it.
There are people looking at it. It's like, how could a human being, like you guys just came away from Henry VIII, and you know that can be a problem, and then you create a court of like 9 Henry VIIIs that don't have any kind of control over them other than they're supposed to do right. How does that make any sense?
Yeah. I've never understood that idea of like, you have a job that you can't lose ever. Even for teachers, I'm like, I remember in college having teachers who had tenure, you couldn't do anything with them, and they made bad decisions, and it was like there's nothing you can do. I remember, because I was electrical engineering, there was one guy, Thagard, at Florida State. He had been to the moon. There's a building named after him on Florida State's campus. And at our engineering school, people kept telling me, do not take Thagard for Circuits and Systems 2. Don't do it. I'm like, why not? They said, because last semester he had 36 students and he failed 35 of them.
Oh, geez.
And this wasn't like it wasn't an introductory course. This was like your last year or so of electrical engineering. And I'm like, there's no way you can fail that many. There's no way students were that bad. But because of his reputation, no one ever challenged him. Deans, nothing. They're like, oh, you failed 35. You guys got to do better. Like it's the same thing with the court. Like there's nothing you can do if they do bad.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the problem. It makes no sense to have a body that, it has okay, your ethics rule. And there is like the one rule is the ethics rule. And then people are saying, well, how are you supposed to enforce it? Right. And so supposedly they're supposed to report their gifts. and then they didn't do it. So then, okay, well, if that's the one rule applies to them, what's supposed to happen? And then they don't have any real evidence of them ever really enforcing it. So then there's like in the law, they suddenly say, well, if we never had to deal with like emoluments clause with like Trump, there's a rule saying that you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to take money, right? Mm-hmm. But because they never had really any cases, they said, well, we don't know what to do because we never had a real case. Well, I bet if it was a black guy, you would know what to do.
You would find some accountability. You would find there would be a fine. There would be some time. There would be something. They'd find something. Yeah,
they make new laws. I mean, so I don't understand. They say, well, we never really enforced this law. And then sometimes with the black people, they make new laws that allow you to put somebody in jail for 20 years for like pot or something. And then that's a new law. And they start putting people in. They never did anybody. They put the first guy in. They don't have any history of using that law. But then when there's something for some executive, they're like, well, we don't know. We never really used that, so we shouldn't do that. So it's like it's a double standard across the board. You start seeing this double standard with class and race and sex. And then you get Robert saying, oh, people should respect us. You have to deserve respect. You don't get respect when you do gerrymandered decisions that make no sense.
Yeah, that's a whole history. I remember I was studying for something. It was that crack law where it was like you had the sentence for crack versus cocaine was 100 times worse. It was because some senator from I think it was Childs or something from Florida. He asked a question of like some expert like, is crack 100 times stronger than cocaine? He's like, the guy was like, it's stronger, but I don't know about 100 times. He's like, well, I think it is. And then he passed a law, and then he's sending everyone to all these huge sentences for crack. And I'm like, just off of his thought. Yeah, exactly. You know why? But all of a sudden that got through really easy. Just like, oh, crack's bad. Got to get it out of here. Got to get all these black people put away, making money for us, making license plates and whatnot in jail.
Yeah, but you find somebody at Studio 54 with a line in the bathroom and you grab him, and like he gets like, oh, you need to go to rehab. And he doesn't get a sentence at all. He's got a psychological problem, so he's got to go to therapy. With the other guy, they find him on the street, like you're 5 years, 10 years. That's it. You steal the Twinkie, you get 5 years. You steal $1 million from somebody's like mortgage. You sell the house, you steal the deed, you get a slap on the wrist. For white collars, but you steal a candy bar in a 7-Eleven, and the guy freaking gets for third time, he's done. Like the other guy stole all these people's mortgages, nothing.
No one from that whole again. Yep. Just go to a different company or change the company name. Yeah. All those guys with the housing crisis, no one did any time. And they all got their bonuses in the end too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you gotta start looking at it. It's like, oh, well, India's a caste system. Well, it looks like we got a caste system too.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, everyone, America's got dirt. I remember there's a great scene. I remember in Lord of War with Nick Cage. He's over in Africa, and it's set in the 90s. And there's two African guys running this hotel. He checks in the hotel, and they're watching the O.J. Simpson trial. And one guy turns, he's like, when I go to America, I will not live in Brentwood. And I was like, that line was always stuck in my head because of that. Yeah. They know America's pretty nice, but not all of it. No.
Yeah. Well, you go to every city, you've got, you go to like Boston, and you got you got your certain areas.
Yeah.
You got South Boston. I was a kid and I went to march from Springfield, Mass to South Boston for some St. Patrick's Day. And
Uh,
we're a black marching band from Springfield, Mass. We
okay.
go to South Boston and our music teachers didn't seem to understand what South Boston was about. Right. So he goes and brings a black marching band into South Boston and we get like rocks and stuff thrown at us. And we're like, and he's like, what's happened? It's like, do you not understand what the dynamic is?
Yeah. Obviously
I
not.
guess
No.
not.
Yeah.
Come on. You
Yeah.
got to be aware where you are. But I guess some people aren't fully aware where they are. But
Yeah. I'll say a lot of people. I had a lot of coaches who were like that. Remember in high school, we played certain schools, and our coach would look like it'd be an all white area. And it's an area where, like, even the refs, like, people in the crowd would be like, y'all black folks gonna have a hard time today because this area, like, they just did not like black folks, and you're playing basketball, so they really don't like you. And our coach is looking at us like, why aren't we getting any calls? And I remember telling him in the third quarter, I'm like, because they don't like us because we're black. He's like, oh, that can't be true. Just play harder. I'm like, all right, buddy. All right, I can't tell you anything. Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I think my band director figured it out when the rock almost hit him. And then he said, "Oh, I guess we got to pack it in."
Yeah. Yeah, they gotta get the black treatment for them to
Yeah, that's
understand
the
what's
way it
really
goes.
happening.
But yeah, they suddenly realized like, oh, there's a problem here. It's like, oh, you fit, maybe there is.
Yeah, yeah, hmm yeah,
But an empathy gap. That's why I was like we're supposed to all be human beings, but there's this empathy gap that you're like, okay, you don't think. And then it's like really probably one of the last things I'll talk about is just the idea. I saw something about like the Tulsa riot,
yeah,
where like the whole black area was like wiped out, right? And there's some
yeah,
people, some politicians or some school board people that say, "Oh, you can't teach that because they might make some kids upset." It's okay, wait. So you don't want to teach real history because it's going to make somebody upset that something bad happened, but you don't, like you don't teach the Holocaust. Like, why can't you teach it? Like, it's going to make some
yeah,
people upset, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. Or like there was a 9/11, never forget. But bad stuff happens to black and brown people. Oh, they forget about that real fast.
Yeah. If they get these people that say these mothers for patriot mothers or whatever start saying,
Liberty,
there's
Mom for Liberty.
some
Yeah,
Republican groups that says they can't. Yeah, they can't teach anything about Rosa Parks. You can't teach anything about SNCC. You can't teach anything about Medgar Evers because you
mm,
might make some kids feel like, oh, maybe the black kids don't like you. Or maybe the black kids will get mad and hurt my kids because you're teaching about. Well, maybe you learn a lesson from history that you shouldn't treat people bad.
yeah,
So you can't do that because you gotta say, oh, it's this Mount Rushmore, everybody's great, and it's like bow to the bow to the kings. That's it.
yeah. It's a load of hypocrisy.
Yeah, I mean that's the way we got to live in a world that's getting kind of out of hand. But I think it's like as black folks, we always figure out something because we've always had to kind of
Yeah,
make do. But
yeah.
what's your kind of outlook for what you're doing in the future for like your creativity and your outlook for try to make progress in this kind of era of like somewhat stagnant.
Kind of diversified in a lot of different areas. So I got books on this side, doing stand up over here, music production with other people. So it's kind of like a diverse, trying to come at it from kind of every angle I can creatively, and to put everything out that I can, especially nowadays because there's so much content out
Mhm.
there. I'm just kind of churn out more and more and more and more and more. That's my plan, at least right now.
I think that's a good approach. Is like this idea that I came up with was this idea of expansive. So the idea of expansive, like it comes to the music, is like I'm not just going to play one genre. if I want to do funk, I can do funk. I can do hip hop. I can do punk. I can do rock. I can do whatever. And the same thing with the podcast. I'm not just going to talk to musicians. I'm going to talk to a very expansive set of guests. So I think once you realize that you kind of live in a world where you can have this open-ended, less niche, and if you're in a niche and you think you can do that, but the problem with these niches, they get burned out. And so it's good to kind of have a little hand into everything. And it's just, I just feel that that's a better approach to kind of throw it all at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, because if you're stuck in one little niche, if that thing burns out, it's kind of like boy bands. I mean, every label always knows you got a boy band, you got 4 years because you're trying to get girls from 13 to 17. As soon as a girl goes to college, she ain't messing with that boy band group anymore. And I think that's the way a lot of the corporates, they want you to be in this real little niche for a short amount of time and they get rid of you. And that's literally how they do it, because they know the sound or whatever it is you're doing is only going to be good for this short period of time. So if you diversify yourself and make actual art, you'll be okay long term. At least I think.
Yeah, when you think about the Beatles, they were like the ultimate boy band. They started as like a boy band and then became like a progressive art rock band. By the time they were done, they've gotten into they kind of set them the mold for the Pink Floyds and the Genesis and all those kind of art rock bands. Look at Abbey Road and Sgt. Pepper's. That's not what Help was. They went from totally different type of structure as a band, and then the industry doesn't figure out. It's like, why are you trying to pigeonhole people when the archetype of the whole industry isn't pigeonholed? They're like all over the map.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a good way to be. If you're all over the map, it's hard to get rid of you. If you only got one little speck, they can flick you away easy.
Yeah, it's better to have your hands in everything. So, but thank you again for being on the show. I want everybody to check out Haji Outlaw HD.biz. That will be clickable. We ask people to click the links of all of the guests that come on the show, so you can get more information and detail on how to get into what they've been talking about here. But thank you again for being on the Family Electric Ghost podcast. We had a really interesting conversation, and I hope everybody has a good day today.
Thank you.